Penn State Football Tailgate Show on 99.5, 107.5 The Bus, Bigfoot Country Legends, and simulcast on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Now, here's Thomas Frank Carr and Landon Tengwall.
Welcome to the Penn State Football Tailgate Show. This is a big one. And I think we can just start it off. Landon, stand up a little bit. Show everyone the shirt you're wearing right now.
Slide right in here.
All right.
Rose victory smells like roses.
This is for the Rose Bowl. Penn State wins. They're probably the number one seed in the college football playoff, the inaugural 12-team college football playoff. If they lose, they could still host a home game at Beaver Stadium in the first ever playoff game at a school anywhere ever for college football. So there's a lot of really exciting, fun things going on today. 8 p.m. kickoff, but we are here 3 hours before kick to get you ready for the game. Landon, you and I have been watching this all week. You've done a great job over at Behind the Wall on your YouTube channel. You broke down a lot of tape this week. I don't think I've ever seen you more fired up for a game before. So set the scene for us. What is Penn State facing today in Oregon, the number one team in the country?
Yeah, this is my rundown of Oregon. We'll start at quarterback. Dylan Gabriel is a Heisman candidate for a reason. And, honestly, I didn't catch that many Oregon games. I saw Oregon, Ohio State, but because Oregon would play late a lot, I wouldn't watch them. And they played a couple Friday nights. I turn on that tape, especially the All-22 tape, and we've talked about how different watching the end zone view that, really only coaches get. Watching him evade rushers and create time for himself in the pocket was one of the more impressive things I've seen. And then some of the throws he had this year were borderline, not even borderline. They were elite. He's probably the best quarterback. I haven't studied Cam Ward or a couple other guys, but I think he's the best quarterback in college football. That's what they have there. All three wide receivers are transfers, but they are all very good. Tez Johnson is a speedster. He was banged up for a little bit. He was actually out for that Wisconsin game. There was a lot of talk about the Wisconsin game this year, and that's kind of the hope that everybody is trying to grab onto of, hey, Oregon is human. And, there's definitely – I did not know about they had a couple injuries and that they were playing for 8 straight games into that Wisconsin game.
Right.
And I mentioned how they struggled in the Wisconsin game. Well, Oregon fans very quickly in my comments section.
They have been all over the internet. They are ready for the moment here.
And I think we had this conversation. It's amazing, guys. Just notice this if you're on social media at all. Majority of Penn State fans are, for the most part, like alumni or married to alumni, family of alumni, that type of thing. The thing I've noticed about Oregon is their fans are like, oh, Penn State's like my second favorite team. And I'm like, what are you talking about? That's disgusting. Like, what are you saying?
We have this joke in my house where that's not a fan. That's a person. You're like that. That's almost like collecting baseball cards. Like, yeah, they're my Philadelphia team or they're my favorite green team. It's like if you're a fan of a team, that's it. Like, there are no second places. You might like other teams. You might like other players. But it's your team against everybody else. And Oregon is coming to play with that in mind, apparently.
They absolutely are. But it's going to be a good one. Just to wrap it all up, Jordan James, their running back, I think is a little bit overlooked because of how explosive the passing game is.
Yep.
And be on the look.
He might be their best offensive player overall when you consider like physical skill, what he does for that offense. He brings a lot of balance and centrality to the table to give those receivers so much space because we'll get into it when we talk about the defense, but I'm really impressed with him.
13 touchdowns over 1,100 yards rushing. That's an elite running back, but when you have this explosive passing offense with a Heisman candidate quarterback, like I said, you get overlooked a little bit. Also, Evan Stewart at wide receiver, that's someone that can make a lot of plays. He's a speedster, but also can go up and win some 50-50 balls. Then on the defensive side, it is impressive. And we should talk about this for a minute and maybe later on. I'm going to go to defense for a second, but all 5 starting defensive backs for Oregon are from the transfer portal, which is pretty impressive. Then a couple more defensive linemen. I believe they got 7 or 8 maybe starters from the transfer portal on this defense. Which
I did the math Sunday after James Franklin spoke with the media, and I've been following this for a while because I knew some of this. Half of their starters are transfers. Actually, it's probably more than half because I didn't go all the way down the depth chart to like nickel corner. I just went off of like who are the guys top 22 snaps on both sides of the ball. I think the kicker, by the way, also a transfer. So,
Sappington.
Yes, Atticus.
Atticus Sappington.
Atticus Sappington. It's going to be an all-name bowl with him out there as well. They have supercharged the team-building process under Dan Lanning. It is not to say that it's cheating. It's not to say that, oh, well, Oregon wouldn't be whatever. They probably wouldn't beat in this game if they didn't do that. But they did. They have. And we've seen other teams go to the portal and build a monstrosity that doesn't work. This team plays so well together. That is coaching. Because when you bring disparate parts in from all parts of the country, sometimes that really doesn't work.
Yeah, no, you're right. And honestly, to wrap it up, I was going to say, at the end of the day, you have Dan Lanning, one of the best young, relatable, fiery coaches in the game. The players clearly love to play for him. And if you've listened to me, I've talked about especially Manny Diaz and kind of what he meant to the team, but how the players really, really wanted to play for him on defense. And that's why our defense looked a little just different. It was always extra special. And those coaches can bring it out. It seems like Dan Lanning is one of those coaches. So it's definitely a matchup today. And talking about Oregon being able to build whatever they want, did you see – I don't remember his name because I don't follow recruiting, but there was a 5-star defensive back that said he was, he talked to Phil Knight about getting his own shoe, and that's why he wants to come to Oregon. So I said, how do we compete with this? People were saying give them creamery flavors, but then it's like we're not giving recruits creamery flavors. Are you insane?
Yeah.
I would literally protest outside of the creamery if we started giving recruits flavors and not like LeVar Arrington first. So
right. Yeah, and also a shoe named after you or ice cream. And I love ice cream, but I mean, shoes are cool. Ice cream is like utility. Like it's too ingrained in the fabric of your life. It's not this is exactly the conversation. Oregon is flashy. Oregon has the jerseys. Now they have the substance. Penn State has had the substance for quite a long time. Penn State is all substance. Do you think they can get some flash today? Do you think they can play with a swagger and a confidence that doesn't go overboard, as we've seen it a couple of times on defense, maybe get a little out of hand, cost them a couple of penalties? Do you think they can play with that level to try and level the playing field as the underdog in this game? Because whether they're number 3 in the country, whether they're number 5 in the country, we've watched the film. This is a great Oregon team. So do you think they can make that happen?
Yeah, I'll tell you. Today, I was working out this morning at the YMCA, T. Frank, and I'm sitting there on the bicep curl machine, and I kind of zoned off, and I started to imagine an offense that it really kind of resembled like the second half Wisconsin 2016 Big Ten offense,
right?
Where it was just explosive and like shot plays and just all over the field, the offense just making stuff happen. That's kind of what I was picturing. And so it made me like smile, and then I was like, okay, hold on, let me like come back, because I will tell you this, Oregon's defense is the best defense we've seen. Mm-hmm. I think they are a step above Ohio State, truly just from the top down. They have someone at every level. Now, I think the one thing, getting some slants behind the linebackers, some crossers, that type of thing over the middle is something they've struggled a little bit with.
Yeah.
And
relative, right? These are relative.
Yeah, if you want to find, I'm saying, if you want to find something. Now, and then also the good news is a big piece of how Ohio State took away Tyler Warren. Yes, they blanketed him.
Yeah.
But when they didn't, they put the best safety in America, Caleb Downs, on him. Oregon is good. They do not have a Caleb Downs. Yeah. So there is no one-on-one that can cover Tyler Warren on this Oregon team. So that is the good news. If they want to try to take him away, they will have to put a couple bodies on him. I'm predicting over 2 touches on the first drive for Tyler Warren. That's how I'm feeling.
Wow.
Hey, if you're Andy Kotelnicki and you're serious about winning this thing, go ahead, get him the rock, because he's going to win you this game today.
So this started out sounding kind of like an Oregon pregame show. It's hard not to, because like we're both evidence-based football people. Like we're watching, like you mentioned, we're watching the film. We're trying to break down what are the realistic possibilities in this game. What are the outlines of how Penn State might play? I wrote a whole article on Friday at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com about here are some of the things we've seen Andy Kotelnicki use against similar defenses that present similar problems. So we're deep in it, but you're a football player, man. The us against the world mentality. That's what people keep texting me. All my friends and family, they're like, does Penn State feel like this is an us against the world game? Feel like this is a who gives a bleep game? You just go out and let it fly? That's kind of what I asked you before. But like that level of you're here. The moment is in front of you that you've been going 1-0 each week for. I understand ultimately the national championship is the goal, but this is the destination for the regular season you've been working for. Can you summon through the pain of the month of November, playing football for 3 straight months, tired, practice, class? Can you summon it for this game? And does that change anything for you if Penn State comes out with that mentality? Which I'll be honest, I don't know that we've seen that, especially from the offense this year.
Yeah, the mentality you're talking about is you just come out swinging, take some shots, be risky, not necessarily dangerous, but be calculated when you're being risky. There's no other way to come out if you're Penn State, because where we sit is where we still sat when we sat in front of Beaver Stadium versus Ohio State. So it's our second biggest game of the year, and it's still the same scenario where it doesn't really matter that much if we lose. Now, I know I'm not obviously if you want the Big Ten championship, that's not that case. That matters. And of course, that would mean a lot to the program. I think it would do a lot with recruits, NIL, all of that. Yeah. But I'm just saying, in the grand scheme of things, the end season goal of the national championship, once again, we sit here in a huge game, yet it almost means nothing when talking about the outcome of where we sit. We're probably going to be, I don't think we go any lower than 7. Then
I think it would be, I think it would be insulting to go 7th, given that Notre Dame would be one of those teams you put ahead of Penn State, didn't have to play. And I know they blew out USC. That is just the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
But Ohio State also lost to 6-5 Michigan. Do you know where we would be if we lost to 6-5 Michigan?
Done.
We'd be done. We'd be out. They lost. They dropped 4 spots.
Right. So if they're 5 or 6, if they're 7, wow. But if they're 5 or 6, they have a home seed. They have a favorable path, especially that 5th playoff spot, a favorable path. So there's, as you mentioned, there's nothing to lose in terms of your ultimate goal. But this does feel like a measuring stick game, not just for James Franklin against top 5 teams, not just about, winning. It's for somebody who's talking so much about the X's and O's and things like that, the pride of this, of being in this moment and not taking your best shot. I think that's just, to me, I'm stuck on that thought. I think it's just because I was so fired up driving over here. Like, I was so excited for this show. As soon as I got in my car, the adrenaline hit. And so I was like, I want to go hit something. I can't imagine what it's like when you're actually, like, on the field.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we're talking about hypotheticals and seeding. And I said, the players, the coaches, and if you're real about this, you want to win tonight. That is the only thing you want. A Big Ten championship. We haven't done it that many times. What do you want to be remembered for? Do you want to be another team and you have a long ways to get to that national championship? Here's a way, just in case you don't make it all the way to that natty, that this team can actually be remembered for something. Because as a player going into this, that is what this means to me, is that, okay, let me put my last name on something and be remembered for something cool at Penn State. Because as much as you want to say, oh, I remember the guys in whatever, 97, 08, like it could be whatever. But at the end of the day, the guys that are remembered are 05, 16, 94, 86, and 82. That's it.
I got a text from my brother-in-law just randomly today. He says, remember watching Trace McSorley? My God, that was great. 8 years later, we're just sitting here. I'm like working on a home reno project. And I look down and my brother-in-law is like, remember Trace McSorley? This team could be that. And also, like, the measuring stick, the reality of the number 1 team in the country. And, like, as much as we talk about this is a good team they're facing, Penn State is also a good team. They are an 11-1 team. They are what their record says there is. Whether or not they match up or whether or not they will ultimately win a national championship, I think that we're going to get a good game tonight because Penn State has given a good game all year long. So final thoughts here about setting the scene before we get into some of the important things that will go towards the ultimate conclusion. What is your final opening statement on the Big Ten championship game?
Penn State has to come out and be physical. If you get out physical today, if you're Penn State, you lose because your skill players, it's just the truth. Their skill players are faster. They're a little bit, they're all 5 stars. They were all
Yeah.
bought and paid for. I mean, I don't mean to sound like a hater, but that's what it is. But they're a little bit more skillful.
Yeah.
And so we're going to have to come out and be more physical, establish the run game, and then up front on defense, get after Dylan Gabriel, make him uncomfortable.
Let's phrase it this way. Oregon's pro scouting department did a great job this offseason. They had a great salary cap because it doesn't exist. They went out and they spent their budget wisely, which is infinite apparently, and they have fielded a very, very good team. I know that the SEC championship is going on right now. Texas is going to have to say something to say about this. I also think it is interesting that in a year where this is fully unbridled, Texas walks into the SEC and is now in the championship game. Oregon walks into the Big Ten. They're in the championship game. Georgia, Penn State, not synonymous with NIL. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't do NIL. Earlier this week, I said no one feels bad for the guy in a Mercedes who then a Bugatti pulls up next to him. Nobody cares about that while you're in your Honda 2 rows back. But this is not the same, and they're in the fight. And so I just think that as we watch college football morph and change in front of us, this is right now the nexus point of that change. 10 years of building, 8 years since the last time they were there, working on a program, trying to retain players, trying to keep players and develop them, trying to selectively go into the transfer portal, but bring in guys that you have relationships with, not necessarily bring in anybody who's good, versus what we just outlined. We'll find out. I just think it's great that it's not the 2 teams that spent the most money, and they're here. We have a little bit of a wild card. Now, Boise State, all those other teams, also a wild card, but most people are focusing on the Big Ten and the SEC, which, of course, we're going to do here throughout the show. We're going to talk about some of that later in around the Big Ten. We're going to have that be around the college football playoff to talk about some of these predictions, some of these matchups, some of those things going forward. But for now, we're going to take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about what the offense has to do, get into some of those details, talk about the Oregon defensive line, which, oh my gosh, my eyes are like saucers looking at these guys.
Oh, no.
But we got Penn State practice this week. That's coming up on the Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships Tailgate Show 2024 on 99.5, 107.5 The Bus, Bigfoot Country Legends, and streaming on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel.
A notable absence from the final game of the 2024 regular season was wide receiver Trey Wallace. The team blew out Maryland 44-7 without him, but he's a pivotal figure in the game against Oregon this coming weekend and was the number 1 item on our checklist to find out at Wednesday's practice. Well, good news. Wallace was back at practice and at the front of the line for the wideouts. According to head coach James Franklin, the team's top receiver missed last week with an injury he tweaked at practice late in the week before Maryland. Normally, quarterback Drew Aller throws with his starting receivers, including Wallace, with specific routes before working with the rest of the receiver group en masse. But this week, things were different. Aller worked with the receivers further down the depth chart, and the pecking order from top to bottom became abundantly clear. Wallace started things off, followed by Liam Clifford, Julian Fleming, and then Omari Evans. From there, freshman Tysier Denmark, who has been clearly rising up the depth chart this season, was the 5th player off the line of scrimmage, followed by Tyler Johnson and Anthony Ivey, completing the linear depth chart. Lastly, Aller and his receivers were working on deep routes during our view of practice, and he had a particularly impressive throw to Clifford that he dropped into the bucket downfield. Now, normally there's an obvious line between the developmental squad and the starters for any given week, illustrated by the numbers they wear at practice. However, it appears that any scholarship player who's been on the field for meaningful snaps is on the active roster this week. Freshman running backs Corey Smith and Quentin Martin were notable, standing in their 24 and 25 jerseys, respectively. Will they play this weekend? Who knows? But it feels like all hands are on deck for this one. That's your practice update. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. More from the Tailgate Show next. Jerseys. So let's talk about the Penn State offense, because that seems like a great place to start. Nate, one of the things, and I want to throw it to your opinions, but Fitz just set it up perfectly. You got a running back and a tight end as your top threats. Those players don't create as much space as receivers, as fast receivers. So for the Penn State offense, what are the challenges you see in getting points and yards, and what is the threshold of success for them in this game, in your opinion?
That's a great. Can any of us envision Penn State scoring more than 24 points in this game?
Let me check my prediction. I'm right on 24. Okay, great.
I was just trying to imagine it. I was literally trying to daydream on air.
Yeah.
It didn't work.
Look, I could imagine Penn State getting to 20 against Ohio State, and like we've seen this movie before. You know what's going to happen, and this Penn State offense, in a lot of look, there are naturally going to be comparisons to 2016 just based on the setting, right? The circumstances alone. This offense isn't. This. It's just not that. They just don't have that number of weapons that Trace McSorley had around him, including a generational talent at running back. Right.
We'll go down to the third receiver, Saeed Blacknall, was a field stretching vertical threat. He was fast. Like that's a big factor in what that offense did. That game, there was a 20. Didn't he take a touchdown on like a contested catch where he ran 20 yards downfield, got a lot of separation, and Trace McSorley got him the ball just in time?
Yeah. So what did I text you this morning, T. Frank? The chart of SEC's top receivers, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would Keandre look like in this offense? What would 19.2 yards per reception look like in this offense if they were right? And obviously it's hypothetical and it's what if and who knows, but the fact that the one relatively consistent threat that they have had in Trey is coming off of missing a game, it's just not great. There's just a lot of not great about what this situation is for Penn State going into this game, especially with Anthony Donko. Like that's the rub is you've got and this is a conversation that's gone on all year, prompted by you, T. Frank, but like your explosive players include on the offensive line, and he's one of the more explosive offensive linemen that they have. Like all of the things that unlock the things that you need to happen to win a game like this aren't great right now for Penn State. That said, as a true believer, I still think Nick has a home run in him somewhere, right? Like I still think that is out there for some of these guys. Obviously, Tyler Warren is capable of moving the ball down the field. There is potential, but I'm not even sure that I see it that way in terms of Penn State's avenue to winning. They're gonna have to grind these guys to death.
Your tailgate. Get the expert's view of today's game. Here's Landon Tengwall as he gives you the key matchups. Brought to you by Stalker Chevrolet. For your next vehicle purchase, come to Stalker Chevrolet and save with low interest rates. And remember, only at Stalker Chevrolet will you get the Stalker Advantage with the purchase of any new vehicle.
Welcome back into the Penn State Football Tailgate Show. We're coming at you with my key matchup of the game, the Big Ten Championship, T. Frank. And I think where Penn State can get the upper hand and win this game, their defensive line, and most importantly, Abdul Carter. Mm-hmm. You have to get after Dillon Gabriel. You have to make him uncomfortable. And who is better than Abdul Carter at hunting somebody down and getting that sack? Because, I mean, Dillon Gabriel, I'm telling you, he finds little pockets. He will move the defensive ends, the defensive linemen, around with his feet while keeping his eyes downfield. I mean, that is why he is considered one of the better quarterbacks in college football. So we have to get after him in that pass game, first off, to slow down those elite wide receivers, but then also in the run game. We can't get it going. And we talked about it. We watched the film. They will get cute. They want their wide receiver screens. They want all that little quick stuff. But at the same time, they will still also want to run duo, which is inside zone, just right up the middle down your throat, and they're going to see if you will be more physical than them. And I think their offensive line is a good group, but we've noticed can be inconsistent at times. So there's an opportunity for this Penn State defensive line. You are missing Alonzo Ford. That's a big loss. He was playing really well,
especially in that run game to absorb some of those double teams as their biggest body guy that was playing the best. And you're not going to make this team one-dimensional, but can you frustrate them enough that they feel one-dimensional? Can you make them impatient with the ground game and make them do one or two different things that they don't want to do? That's when other teams have been successful, is pressure on Dillon Gabriel where it's kind of in his face And, we talked about the Wisconsin game and all the caveats that go into that. But what happened was he was off his game that game. And part of that was frustrating the ground game and then taking away some of those deep shots and making him be a patient quarterback because he likes to be aggressive, right? Like he'll throw the screens, he'll throw those, those no read plays, and he'll be happy to do those. But when he has the ball in his hands, he's looking downfield and he wants to take those shots. He's patient. He will check it down. But if you can take away those things and make them earn it, again, they got to make this a Big Ten game, right? They got to make it a Big Ten game up front with that defense. And I think you're absolutely right there. Zane Durant, how do you think he factors into this game given what we just talked about? Those big double teams. If there's one thing that happened this year in that Ohio State game, he got pushed around a little bit. He gave as good as he got until it was, crunch time down in the fourth quarter. But throughout that game, it is the one time we've seen that from him. Do you think he plays to that level that they need him to in this game, especially against the run, to be that run stuffer and disruptor?
It's funny. I started writing a tweet today, and I almost put it out saying Zane Durant needs to have his best game of the year today. And he does. And I didn't want people to take it as a slight because he's been playing great. He's been playing borderline elite.
Right.
And shame on you, Big Ten media coaches, I don't care, for Zane Durant being an honorable mention all Big Ten.
Yeah.
That is
some of that.
That's sad. And we don't even need to get into all that, but he has been a lot better than that. Let me tell you that. Now, Zane Durant tonight, I do think he needs to have his best game of the year if Penn State wants to win tonight. You have to be able to slow them down in that interior, because there are times where the defensive tackles of the opposing team, when just watching film, they've blown it up. They've broken the double team, gotten through, and disrupted the running back in the backfield. But I've also seen these three guys in the interior for Oregon move two guys 5 yards downfield, and you go, wow, that's a dominant group. So they have the ability to be beaten, and Zane Durant is one of the better defensive tackles in all of college football. But he's got to bring it tonight. And I think, as you mentioned, it hurts because Alonzo Ford, we really found that second defensive tackle when we're facing a team, especially if they say, hey, we want to establish the run.
Right.
Putting Alonzo Ford in.
Let him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he was really starting to play up there with the likes of Zane Durant in the run game. And then get some injuries. Hakeem Beamon leaves, obviously. And now you sit there and it's really just Keziah Izzard.
You got three guys.
And Devon Lees battling in there with Zane Durant. They got those three guys. It's on them tonight. I'll tell you what. If those three guys have a bad night and get pushed around, I would almost guarantee Penn State loses. Now, if you tell me they have a great game, I like our odds a lot more, T. Frank.
Yeah, and putting any team in third and long gives you the opportunity to go get the quarterback, like you mentioned with Abdul Carter. But you got to get to third and long, and you can do that with this team, as you mentioned. Like, they have been in a lot of third and longs, and then Dylan Gabriel becomes really impressive of extending plays and everything you outlined earlier. But I do think that disruption in terms of movement, the athleticism of the Penn State defensive tackles might be an advantage for this group. And then secondly, Johnny Cornelius is a good tackle. But I think if you're saying, like, where's the path to victory for Penn State? Abdul Carter versus a Johnny Cornelius on third down. I'm betting on Abdul Carter almost every single time. We had this conversation at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Actually, it was via text in our work chat. Somebody asked, is Abdul Carter the best defensive end or singular defensive lineman that Oregon's faced? And the answer is yes, because there are only two or three players in the conversation, and they're not on the Ohio State defense. So, yes, this is the best defensive end they've faced.
They're definitely not. Ohio State was getting some Big Ten love as far as the awards with not too much production. Sorry. Just had to put that out there.
By the way, we want to give a shout out to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, to everyone watching here. We got hundreds of people watching online. I always appreciate everybody here checking in. I'm going to guess that your name is Hash. It is in a script that I don't recognize. So it looks like Hash. He says, good luck tonight. Thanks for the show. One of the friendliest Oregon fans. He said, checking in as an Oregon fan. So checking out our stream. Hopefully, I think that we've been pretty fair about this all week. I feel like we've been reading it as it is. Oregon fans didn't like it when I say that they don't have speed rushers, which I was trying to give them a compliment that these guys play with power and length, but whatever. We got a lot of people on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Throw your thoughts in. If I'm able to get to them while we're hyper-focusing on the game and the matchups, we'll throw them up here. But if you want more at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, it's just $1 to sign up. You get 7 days all through this very important time. You can try us out, and then you can decide if you want to continue with us. But that's our deal right now.
Yeah, I was talking about their D-line on Twitter, and I mentioned that both Mateo Uyunglele and Jordan Birch are both very large humans. We're talking 295, 6'6".
Yeah.
And that's what I said. I said big rushers, they're not speed rushers.
Yeah.
I start getting sent videos of how one of their DNs was on, the punt team as a gunner and was running down, and they're like, "Do you see the speed? Are you kidding me? It's not a speed rusher." I'm like, dude, that's not what it means.
That is not the
Jordan Birch. I don't care that he went down on punt coverage. He's still not a speed rusher. He can have 4.3 speed.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily his moves. He is a power rusher. That's how he works his moves. So,
right.
And they are good
definition
at
of it.
Exactly. But I do think it plays well. I'd much rather have those type of defensive ends than play in Abdul Carter.
Right. Yeah, because the speed is one of the most dangerous things on the football field, right? Because what happens when you are challenged by speed as any player? You have to overcompensate, right?
Absolutely.
And then when you overcompensate, you're off balance, you're out of position, you're easy to toast, like absolutely toast. But there are other ways to win, and there are other ways to be dominant, and that is what this group does. They're 270 pounds plus across the board. They have power and fluidity, and they're not slow, but they're not running the hoop on every single play. We're going to get to them in just a little bit later, because I do want to get your I think their defense, it sings. Like, it is a fun front to watch. Not only are they talented, but what they do with that talent is super creative. But on the defensive side of the ball, it's not just the rush unit, because obviously they need to play well. They can't leave the secondary out to dry. But in a bunch of big games that I watched this year, you take a good Michigan defense, right? A really good Ohio State defense. In both of those games, Oregon's receivers just ran faster than the other player down the field and scored a touchdown. Does that happen to Penn State tonight?
It can.
It can.
It definitely can. I mean, look, this is the hardest task for also our DBs. I think the three guys for Oregon are better than Ohio State. I mean, I think Jeremiah Smith is good, but honestly, especially how they performed with, added Will Howard to that combination. And
I think that's the biggest difference.
Yeah, and not
right?
CJ Stroud or Justin Fields.
Yeah.
Well, there is a little bit of a difference there. So I think that's the biggest thing. So because Dylan Gabriel's the one throwing the ball, I think this is the toughest challenge for our DBs this entire season. Now, A.J. Harris has been playing very well. Zion Tracy, too. But Zion Tracy, here is a challenge today. There is a lot out there to, have for Oregon, but it really just it just comes down to, I think, our pass rush. If we let them have 4 to 5 seconds back there and to let their wide receivers run, we're not going to have a good day.
Right.
Like, there needs to be times where in 2.5 seconds, someone is on Dylan Gabriel. And also, like, it just feels like you watch some of the plays for Oregon, he will be directing traffic, just bouncing around, moving around, evading guys, keeping guys downfield for like 10 seconds. And it's going to be hard. So there's going to be plays.
So how do you think Penn State is done with contain? So that's what we're talking about here is pressuring him, but not letting him escape. Right. How do you feel Penn State has done that against the mobile quarterbacks they've seen so far this year?
I think they've done a fairly good job. And I think, we talked about Abdul Carter, and you talked about rushing that hoop, and that's kind of where they run the outside of the tackle, try to bend the edge. Mm-hmm. That is Abdul's move. Now, he has gotten better of kind of changing up his catalog a little bit of what he puts on there as far as his pass rush move. He's kind of really working his hands now. But I would expect Dylan Gabriel to really be ready to step up when Abdul Carter tries to run that edge and then roll out. So be on the lookout for that. But there's going to be plays where the defensive backs have to cover for 8 seconds or more. Yeah. Like, that's a reality when you're playing Dylan Gabriel. He's going to be bouncing around, creating time. So you're going to have to survive for a little bit.
Where you flush him, I also notice is important too, because I've seen a couple of times, and maybe this is just luck, but there are times where he's flushed and he is willing to run out of the pocket in any direction, regardless of where his receivers are. So if he's flushed into the boundary and his receivers are all over the field, now you've left him with nowhere to go. So it's the quality of the escape too, understanding the leverage of where you are on the field, where you can't let him go. So, I mean, this is a full-on Patrick Mahomes style challenge. Listen, I've had these conversations for 5-6 years now about my favorite team in the NFL trying to defend Patrick Mahomes. It's infuriating. You can have the perfect play, and then he just kind of does what he does, and he gets 5 yards when he needed 4. again, I don't want to go too far because you can make Dylan Gabriel make mistakes. We've seen it on film all the way back to UCF. He will gamble at times, and he's rewarded for it more times than not. And this is the other thing that James Franklin said earlier this week is that he's been around forever. Nothing surprises him. A sixth-year quarterback, he should believe in himself. He should believe in his arm and his talent because he's done it. He's seen it. He's been part of great teams before, and he's here surrounded by a ton of talent. Got a lot of people here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel I want to give a shout-out to. Ryan, a regular here on the channel, he says, checking in from Texas. Hope for a close game into the fourth. The fall in the defensive tackles keep us in the game, as Landon pointed out in his your keys to the victory. Yeah, your keys to the game. Excuse me. Sorry, I was trying to set this up. Talk that Trace. Is here. Says T. Frank, I'm nervous but excited. Feel like everyone is saying Franklin can't win the big game, and his record has shown that. We have the talent. We can't play tight. We can't play emotionally. How do you view the whole big game James conversation? Because it is both fair that they don't punch above their weight. Typically, they win the games they're supposed to win. They have not found a way to win games that they're not supposed to win. Some teams do that. This team has usually been chalk. They need to buck that trend tonight. Whether it's a top 5 matchup and they're in the top 5, or it's a top 10 matchup and they're facing a team that's 2 or 1 and they're 7. They've never closed that gap consistently. Do you think that there's anything to that in this game, given what we talked about of setting up what Oregon is and what Penn State is?
The pressure's there, and you feel it if you're a player, if you're a coach. You know that the word on the street is that you can't win big games. Trust me, because I knew it as a player. I knew going into Ohio State and Michigan that's what the thought process was for even our own fans.
Mm-hmm.
So it's obviously something that is on your mind, and if you let that get to you, it can cause problems. And if you allow that to dictate how you move and how you feel and your emotions, shout out to Talk That Trace, then it can really get into the game. So I think you have to do your best part of still keeping it the 1-0 mentality and making sure that you're not too emotional, too over the top, because it is the Big Ten championship. You still need to play within your game, play your role. And as Coach Franklin always says, do your 1/11th. If everybody does their 1/11th while you're out there, you're living in a good place.
So the answer to this next question is everybody has to have a good game. But outside the guys that we've outlined, who are the underrated players that need to play really well in this game for Penn State to keep this a low-scoring game, which is where we expect them to be able to win a game, is in the 20s, in the low 20s maybe. So who on defense needs to play their best game of the year to make that happen?
My number one pick for this, Tony Rojas. Yep. Yeah, that's where you were going?
That's where I was going. That's exactly where I was going.
And when I was saying just do your 1/11th, do your job, that type of thing, that's pretty much what I was talking about. Because when Tony plays within his role and does his job and stays in his gap and trusts his keys, he is an elite linebacker, and he can start to make those splash plays.
Yeah.
But for a while there, when people were kind of asking why was Tony struggling, was because he's so athletically gifted that he was trying to jump out of it, basically was trying to jump out of his gap, make plays,
run around his blocks.
Run around his blocks, whatever, but make plays that weren't really his to make. Those were his plays to take up a gap and allow one of his other teammates to do it, that type of thing. So that's where you have to grow and mature, especially as a young linebacker, and start to figure that out. But I think these past couple games, he's been playing very well. Yeah. He looks a lot more comfortable, and I think more importantly, looks a lot more confident. So a big game from Tony Rojas and maybe a splash play from Tony Rojas, a little bit of a turnover would be.
Do you remember this summer when we were going over Tony Rojas film and we were talking about him as a run plugger, and I said he needed to show that he can play through contact. And then the very next play you put up, it was him playing through contact. That was my expectation coming into the season, that we would see more of that. And for the longest time, I gave him the pass of it. He definitely got injured early in the year, and that was affecting him to a certain degree. But then at some point that becomes less relevant because you're out there. You have been out there all season. You need to find a way to play through that. And so I'm struggling to understand his journey through that because we can't have this conversation, right? We can't have this conversation in detail about what's the problem if there is still a problem. The thing I've noticed, to your point, is he's not pulling himself out of gap trying to run around blocks. They're either blitzing him at the line of scrimmage and he's doing his job of being in that gap, or he's playing with a little more physicality. But I still don't think he's to the level I expected from taking on, with the proper shoulder, shedding and getting to the football, or just being physical through contact. When you displace yourself like that, Len, the easiest thing I imagine for you is like when a guy wants to run around you and all you have to do is put your arm out, and now it's a 6-foot length he's got to run through. Now the running back has all that room to run. I guess, have you seen any of that? Am I describing something that you haven't seen, or is it a mental thing for Tony that you were mentioning?
Yeah, well, as far as taking on blocks and just like getting your hands in there if you're Tony, and there can be some of that mental block of not wanting to take on the physicality and say, hey, I'm athletic enough. I can get around and get back and have almost too much confidence in your athletic ability. And you end up
opting out of contact is what I call it.
Opting out of, well, yeah, that is definitely one thing that you can do and get yourself in some trouble. And you start hopping out of gaps and dilly-dallying out there, your team will get mad at you real fast because defense, I feel like it's a little bit different. Like on defense, when you purposely move yourself out of your gap to try to make a play, you get in some trouble with your teammates because it's all, like I said, if you do your 111th, everybody keeps their gap integrity, good things happen. But you jump out, guys are going to be mad because if 10 guys keep all of everything they need to do and one guy doesn't do it, that can end in an explosive play for the offense. So it is going to be vital for young Tony Rojas to have a big game tonight. And I think overall as a defense, we'll get into it, but Penn State's going to need some turnovers tonight.
Yeah, for sure. I would say another player that is under the radar right now because he was out for a little bit is Elliott Washington. We've seen Elliott Washington play really well. We've also seen him struggle in some big moments, giving up some fairly standard football plays from an awareness standpoint or from an athleticism standpoint, where he's a very fast athlete in a linear sense, but changing directions against these receivers, he needs to come back strong if he plays. But as you mentioned, that defensive back group as a whole needs to play well. I'm pretty confident in Zion Tracy. I feel like he's shown enough this year. Cam Miller has gotten better at tackling, but there's still times he's susceptible to some of those double moves, especially in the slot from their athletic players. They like to get out in space. So those are just a couple other players that I had on mind. Is there any final player you want to throw in before we get back into looking at something else and moving on to the next segment?
Yeah, I got you. Riley Thompson.
Hey, that's a good one.
I want a good game from Riley Thompson. Boot that ball. Give me a couple 50 burgers. Pin them inside the 10 a couple times. That could be big time in a game where we got a couple special teams. We got Sappington on the other side. We got Tyler Jasansky. And then, I already got his name, but our long snapper, Tyler Jasansky, his brother is also the long snapper for Oregon. He's the backup. But we got a little bit of a long snapper brother.
It's a blood feud.
Yeah, blood feud today. There's a lot on the line today, T. Frank.
Well,
Tyler
Jasansky.
Tyler Jasansky.
So we'll get into the other side of the ball. We'll get into the offense coming up next. We started with the defense, which I was surprised we started with the defense because
we always go offense.
We always go offense. You're right, because the defense has kind of just set it and forget it for most of the season. They have been really good. I understand there have been some moments where they haven't played their cleanest game, but of the two sides, it's like, we'll get to the defense later because it's pretty cut and dried. If they play well, Penn State wins the game. Here, there's some more challenges, but I do think, like we talked about with that offensive line, or Penn State's offensive line versus the Oregon defensive line, might be the defining matchup of the game for Penn State, as much in the negative sense that prevents them from winning the game. I know we talked a lot about them this week. We're going to come back. I'm going to ask him a bunch of questions about what it's like to defend a defensive line that can do everything. But first, we have to get to James Franklin's comments in the Coach's Corner, and then we'll be back on the Penn State Football Tailgate Show, driven by Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships on 99.5, 107.5 The Bus, Bigfoot Country Legends, and streaming on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel.
Press conferences are boring, right? That's why we've set aside the most important stuff for you. It's Coach's Corner, powered by Bobby Ray Hall Honda on West College Avenue, State College. Online at Bobby Ray Hall Honda of StateCollege.com.
The bad news? No one gets the weekend off. The good news? Penn State is playing in the Big Ten championship game. A Michigan-sized collapse from Ohio State, coupled with a Nittany line throttling of Maryland, sees James Franklin's squad make their second trip to the Big Ten championship ever. As Franklin puts it, the team's first week of December plans changed quite drastically in the span of 6 hours.
I went into the locker room after the game, and I told them I got good news and bad news. We were supposed to have Sunday off as the staff and players, and now we're practicing and working, and it'll be a long day. That's a positive. That's obviously a positive. Our guys are excited about it, but a very different, obviously a very different, week. It was going to be a week for rest and recovery, some strategic practices, but obviously we always have to be prepared for all these different scenarios, and we were. So
the Happy Valley Trenches have been hit by the injury bug in November, with standout starting right tackle Anthony Donko going down with a long-term injury. Redshirt junior Wisconsin transfer Nolan Rucci was the man tasked with filling in Donko's spot. While Maryland is no Oregon in terms of front seven pressure, James feels confident in what he saw on November 30th in State College out of Rucci.
Typically for offensive linemen, if you're not talking about them, that's a good thing. There wasn't a whole lot of conversation about it during the game, and then afterwards, I think he graded as one of our players of the game. Very pleased with him, very confident in him. He's kind of steady Eddie in terms of his approach and his demeanor. And I think he's just going to continue to get better as the year goes on.
Penn State's offense under A.D. Kotelnicki has looked red hot, but Tyler Warren has gone supernova. The should-be Heisman candidate has started at tight end and starred there, adding to his accolades the record-breaking touchdown grab against Maryland. The end zone trip earned him the #1 spot on the all-time list of tight end scores in Penn State history, overtaking Pat Fryermuth. It's safe to say Franklin is more than satisfied at number 44's successes this season.
Having a phenomenal year. Our offense, obviously a big part of it goes through him, but we also recognize that everybody we play defensively also says that, one of their big goals is to limit his impact. Hasn't happened a whole lot yet. He's the model just in terms of how he's handled all of this with such humility. Really proud of him.
The Nittany Lions will set a new record. First old Big Ten school to play all 4 of the new Big Ten schools. They beat USC, UCLA, and Washington in the regular season, and now get to face the Oregon Ducks in prime time in Lucas Oil Stadium. The portrayal before the season was the former Pac-12 schools played a West Coast-style offense. But after playing 3 of the 4 so far this season, Franklin doesn't really see it that way.
There's some similar characteristics, but I would also say that I think a lot of those programs and a lot of those coaches, studied the Big Ten, but also studied the SEC and said, how do our programs and how do our rosters look different than the Big Ten and the SEC, and what modifications do we have to make to close the gap? I think really all these programs have done that.
That was your Penn State Coaches Corner. More from the Tailgate Show in a moment.
We'll be back with more of the Penn State Tailgate Show right after this.
Hi, I'm Matt Nobby, General Manager.
Yeah, so let's get to the preview then and go through. I know we already talked a little bit about some of the matchups here. What are you looking for here in the preview? Where do you want to start?
Yeah, so again, I think there's a number of really good matches here. Start at 125. We mentioned Luke Littledahl, the Penn State standout freshman. He's number 16 in Intermat's top 33 rankings at the moment. He's going to be taking on number 15 Sheldon Seymour, longtime Lehigh wrestler, senior there. So a chance for Littledahl to earn a ranked win, potentially move up in the rankings. It's early. It's not the end of the world if he loses. I think that many would probably call him the favorite to win this match, but he is wrestling an older guy, so we'll see how that shakes out at 125 pounds. But I think he probably wins there. 133, I won't belabor the point. Braden Davis will have a shot at Ryan Crookham, as far as we know, the number 1 ranked 133-pounder in the country. Braden Davis comes in at number 10. So as long as he's healthy, good test for him. Again, when you talk about what you want to see, doesn't have to win the match, but being competitive would tell you a lot about his outlook at 133 in this new weight. It's been so far, again, it's been a little little bit of a hiccupy start with the early injury against Drexel, and then he didn't get the wrestle at Army. So how fresh is he? How active is he? Things like that. We'll be watching to see where he's at from just a health and movement perspective during this dual meet in Allentown against Lehigh on Saturday. And then, you look through, there's a couple other ranked matchups, not particularly close ones, of course, but the one, there will be two. Former Penn State wrestler Michael Beard is in his final season at Lehigh. He's number 6 at 197 pounds. Like we said, we assume he's going to get Josh Barr in that match for Penn State, so Barr versus Beard. Should be a good one. Again, Michael Beard is a guy who left Penn State because Max Dean was coming back for another year, didn't have a place to get in the starting lineup, so he went to Lehigh, got in the starting lineup, has had success, is having success so far this year, so a very good measuring stick for either Josh Barr or Lucas Cochran, whoever wrestles him. I assume it'll be Barr. Very fascinated to see that outcome. And then from a ranking perspective, it'll be quote unquote close from an outcome perspective. I would be shocked if it was. But number 10, Owen Treffin of Lehigh is number 10 at 285 pounds. He'll be, of course, taking on number 2, Greg Kirkfleet from Penn State to presumably close out that match at the PP&L Center. So, unsurprisingly, T. Frank, I see another Penn State dual meet victory incoming. And the things we'll be able to learn will be how those individual bouts play out, which guys look the part and which guys look like they need some more work as the non-conference portion of the season continues.
All right, so if fans want to follow along with what you're writing and the recaps, where can they go find all of that stuff?
Yeah, we'll have it over at bluewhiteillustrated.com. Just keep an eye out for it. You can always look for just the wrestling stuff by going to the news tab and then typing in, punching in wrestling. There's going to be a lot of stuff going on at Blue White Illustrated this Sunday.
Yep.
Penn State,
Welcome back to the Penn State Football Tailgate Show. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, former Penn State offensive lineman Landon Tengwall, and we need to talk about the Penn State offense against the Oregon defense. One of the things that I've noticed about this team, and I'm sure you noticed this as well, I've never seen a defense, especially on the college level, maybe some SEC teams, and we're talking Georgia a little bit later and some of the things they do. I've never seen a defense be able to shift between odd fronts and even fronts, 3-down linemen, 4-down linemen, and truly do both of those things really well until I watch this group. So we've talked about how big they are. We've talked about how their pass rushers aren't finesse speed rushers or speed rushers generally. It's because part of their makeup, part of their DNA is to be able to do this. So as an offensive lineman, how difficult is it when pre-snap you've got 2 defensive tackles, and then suddenly you got a nose tackle and a defensive tackle to your outside?
T. Frank, let me put it like this. All right, so anybody that's watching on YouTube, if you're on radio, you don't get as good of a breakdown, but I'm right here in my stance, right? And at the moment, let's say we got 4 down, and I have a double team with the tackle. We're already talking about, hey, we're doubling from this guy down all the way up to this backer right here, number 44, whatever. And then last second, as Drew Adler's going, ready, they shift over. And as they shift over, not only does the guy you're double teaming with change. So now let's say I'm not double teaming the tackle anymore. Now if I'm the guard, I'm with the center because the defensive lineman shifted. So not only are we to have a different double team partner, we're also going to go to a different linebacker than I was going to go to with the tackle. And
you've got to go find that guy visually.
Yes.
At the snap.
And by the way, you have to be physical doing all of this. You have to be punishing dudes, moving guys off the ball.
Yeah.
So just to take you inside the mind of an offensive lineman for a second, as Drew Aller's going, ready, go, on that ready, that's when they move. Like that is the trigger point for when a defensive line wants to change their alignment. They wait for the first thing, and then it is hard to do. So, and that's something that we saw Penn State's offensive line struggle a little bit with Minnesota because that's how Minnesota was. They played different fronts. And the hard part, like I said, is there's so many different things to remember. Not only if they just come out and stem last second, it's called stemming when you go from odd to even, and maybe you do that last second.
Yeah,
that's hard, but it's also hard to just be preparing for everything because that new play that you put in. Not only do you have to remember that new play, but you have to remember the new play versus odd and even front. You have to remember this play versus odd and even front. All because there's rules for each one. I have to remember rules in my head.
It's a flow chart, right?
Pretty much, yeah. It's a lot. And
if you start at the beginning of the flow chart, odd or even, and suddenly you're on an entirely new tree, Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. See, it's not, dude. It's not listen. It's not fun. It's not fun to have to remember all that, and that's why going against a team that is strictly just odd or even front is a lot nicer. But you got an Oregon team that's versatile that'll put in. I won't drop his name, but I had a offensive lineman that was on a Big Ten team that DM'd me and said that he thought he saw my post about Oregon's defensive line and said he didn't think they were that good. This is a starter for a Big Ten team. I'm not going to put out what team, but a starting tackle. And he said he didn't think they were that good, but he said their stunts, they were really good at running those twists and stunts, and that's where they got them. So they do. So they move pre-snap and post-snap. And this is where, we talk about how big they are, where they've got a 330-pound nose tackle. Derek Harmon is athletic, and he's big, and he's strong. And then, of course, everyone likes the defensive end who's 295, right? So they've got these odd body shapes. And then, oh, by the way, their base D ends are 270. I keep mentioning that because it is relevant to this conversation of if you want to run the football, that's important. Are there things that they open themselves up to by doing that, though? Do you think there are things that Penn State, from a schematic perspective, can do themselves that, okay, now, sure, you've now changed to an odd front. You were expecting us to do X, but we're actually going to do something totally different and kind of reverse akimbo it on them. Well, that's kind of the whole game. That's when it starts to get fun as a coordinator, when you are planning for what they're going to respond to what you show first.
Right.
So you bring out, it starts to get real mind gamey when it's a couple good coordinators play against each other. So that can get fun. But there is definitely some of that for Koroniki that says, hey, when we come out in this two-back set, they're going to come out in this defense, and we'll, Drew, if you see what you like, change the play real quick, and that's how we'll attack. I mean, there's a lot of going out, and there's a lot of times you're calling two different plays. If you ever hear kill, any of that means that there was two plays called, and that one of them is the first one. And if you get up to the line and he goes ready, that's what you're running. Or if you're kill, then it's the second play that was called.
Yeah.
So I think you'll see some of that from Koroniki tonight, feeling out what is he going to get from this Oregon defensive front.
I'm interested too. We've seen a couple of times the communication between the center and the quarterback not be perfect, and we've seen Drew Al get really upset about that. A lot of times it comes when he's not under center, which is not a shock to me. But offensive communication, to the point that you said about the DM of they're not that great, but the stunts really get you. Free rushers are the number one way to kill a play. Offensive communication in a game like this, on the road, neutral site. Some of the conversation is that this is going to be kind of a blah crowd because it's an NFL stadium, so it's smaller. If you've ever been to Lucas Oil, they have leather seats in the end zone, which, I mean, you can only get so excited sitting in a leather seat.
Wait, real quick before can we talk? So every game today, I don't know, you were redoing steps in your house or something.
Yeah.
But every game today has been awful from an attendance standpoint. Big 12 in Jerry's world. Down
I did watch that
Texas,
one. Yeah.
Nobody there. SEC. Really lacking, I thought. Nothing close to what it's looked like. I'm curious to see what Big Ten's going to look like tonight. But you know what's happening is some of these teams might have 3 or 4 games for the playoffs. Fans are saying, I'm not spending my money on a championship game that doesn't actually matter.
It means nothing in the terms of the ultimate goal. Again, the Big Ten championship means everything, and also it is a step on the way to the hopeful national championship. But in that environment, does that level the playing field for the offenses in this game so that you can communicate and you can be heard and you can get all the information, whether it's correct or not, you're all on the same page after the snap?
It definitely does. It makes it a lot easier when you're not dealing with that noise factor that I think maybe Dylan Gabriel could be dealing with a little bit, because you think about it, Penn State, a Big Ten championship means something. We haven't tasted this in about 8 years right now.
Yeah.
Oregon, it's their first year. It's kind of how when Penn State, and I talked to Keith Goon-Conlon about this, they didn't care when we won in 94. We won the Big Ten championship, which there wasn't a game, but you just won it outright. Because Penn State entered in 93. They won their second year in the Big Ten. He was like, none of the players cared because we were brand new.
Yeah.
I think Oregon will have a little bit of that. They don't care that much. There's no historic for
they haven't had to work for it.
Exactly.
Right. They haven't lost a game 9-7 in the snow.
Exactly.
Right.
They haven't been against 9 overtime against Illinois. Sorry. How did that? I shouldn't have brought that up on this day. I'm sorry, guys. But, they haven't been through that. So it doesn't mean as much to them. And I also think their fans know, like I said, they're worried about a national championship. I don't think we're going to see as much travel. from Oregon, and obviously it's much closer for us than it is for Oregon fans, for the majority of Oregon fans.
Yeah.
I think we'll see like 70-30 tonight, and hopefully we can get a little bit of a noise factor going on, some We Are chants, all that good stuff.
And it's important to give them something to chant about, which the offense in big games has struggled to do over the last 2 seasons. I don't want to bring that up every time, but it is relevant in this particular game. And somebody just here in the chat mentioned, Wayback says, I don't want Penn State to be conservative in this game like they were against Ohio State. So we talk about the defensive line. I think running the ball is going to be difficult in this game for all of those reasons we just talked about and you outlined with the communication up front, let alone the physical ability of the guys opposite of Penn State and some of the weaknesses against elite talent that we've seen play out on the offensive line. How do you go about manufacturing points in this game in your mind? And like actually going to get them and not wait until the fourth quarter to then throw the football and be aggressive.
Well, we're going to have to run the ball. If we can't run the ball, I don't see a world in where we can necessarily win.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you can put it on Drew, but we snuck out of USC in a game where we had to put it all on Drew. And this Oregon defense is miles and miles ahead of USC's defense.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to be a balanced offense if you're Penn State and you want to win this game today. So that's going to start out. And look, you're going to have negative plays and you're going to have ups and downs. There are going to be points where Penn State is going to get punched in the mouth, and Oregon's going to get punched in the mouth too. It's 2 really good teams. It's going to be about how can you respond and do you have the leadership? And I think going down the line of what Penn State has been through this year, from everything we've talked about it, Bowling Green being down at home, Wisconsin losing Drew for a little bit, whatever, Minnesota didn't blink.
Does that really build into your DNA to learn to win in different ways?
Yeah.
Because that's what you're describing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is learning to win in a bunch of different ways, whether it's run, pass, third quarter, fourth quarter, win in the first quarter. You can draw upon those experiences in the moment to be like, okay, we got this.
Yeah, well, I think if you kind of look at a little bit, let's talk about Ohio State for a second.
Mm-hmm.
How we lost, and it kind of felt like we were almost too conservative. Obviously, we didn't give Tyler the ball, but it felt like we were holding stuff back a little bit. You get to Minnesota, and you put it all on the line, and you call a fake punt there, and you go for it 3 times on 4th down on the final drive.
Yeah,
that is called learning from your mistakes and saying, hey, we're a better team. Let's just handle this on our own terms. And it was obviously, like I said, learning from those mistakes of kind of taking it by the reins. If you're Penn State, let's see some more of that today.
So I'll start this time. Underrated player that I think needs to play really well in this game. For Penn State to be able to run the ball, I think it's going to have to be outside the tackle. I think there's going to be a lot of, I don't want to say trickeration, because that is overused, but non-standard running plays, a lot of options and pitches, a lot of things out in the flat, as long as they can establish something on the interior. So Khalil Dinkins, the run blocker, I think needs to have a strong game to allow Penn State to get out in space, allow Nick Singleton to get out in space. The obvious one that we've talked about a lot, and BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, I've broken this down. I know that you're familiar with all these things too. I'm think Nick Dawkins. If you want to run outside zone, Nick Singleton's averaged 9 yards a carry in outside zone since he's gotten back kind of into the healthy groove since week 14. Or since, what game was that where he came back?
Let's see, came back hurt USC. He was out for what, UCLA?
I want to say
he didn't play UCLA.
Yeah, about the last month of the season.
Yeah.
He's averaged 9 yards a carry in outside zone. So Nick Dawkins needs to be a guy that plays. He doesn't have to be a superstar. I just think he needs to execute his assignment and not get beat either mentally, number one, and then don't get dominated physically, number 2. Who are the guys on your mind that need to have a good game that maybe are outside the spotlight of the top guys that we always talk about?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about him a lot, but Trey Wallace. I don't know. I mean,
right.
You can name whichever wide receiver.
I feel like the number 1 wide receiver outside the spotlight is actually fair.
It is for Penn State. It's there.
Oh man.
So I mean, we talked about it all year. I think I've said it in every single one of my pregame shows that we need a wide receiver to step up this week. But we do. We know we're going to target Tyler Warren, but it will get to a point that Oregon is good enough, and they are the number 1 team in the nation. They will blanket Tyler Warren. I mean, they didn't just watch the Ohio State tape and fall asleep. They watched it and they saw that if you blanket Warren and force other players to beat you one-on-one, well, Ohio State had success with it. So I think we will see more of that from Oregon today. And until we prove that we have wide receivers and other playmakers that can win one-on-one, they will continue to do that. So I'm looking at Trey Wallace, Liam Clifford. We need to win today. Julian Fleming, let's show up and make some plays for our quarterback, because Drew Adler's going to need some help to get it done in Lucas Oil Stadium tonight.
Oh, there's so many other things. We'll talk about it later. We got to get to some other things, including the fact that this is the Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships tailgate show. Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships celebrating more than 40 years of service to the community. Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships has a vehicle to fit your budget and transportation needs. Home of the $1,000 lowest price guarantee with 20 locations throughout Pennsylvania. This week in Penn State sports, and then we'll be back on the tailgate show. Stay tuned.
It's more than just football at Penn State. Here's This Week in Penn State Sports, brought to you by Bobby Rahal Lexus in Lewistown. Get ready to experience luxury like never before at Bobby Rahal Lexus of Lewistown. We are Nittany Valley's award-winning Lexus dealership at 425 Electric Avenue. Visit us on the web at BobbyRahalLexusofLewistown.com.
All roads lead to Happy Valley. Mike Rhodes' Penn State men's basketball team beat the brakes off the 8th-ranked Purdue Boilermakers 81-70 on Thursday. The decisive victory saw Penn State earn its first win over a top 10 team since 2019. Ace Baldwin Jr., Nick Kern, Puff Johnson, Freddie DeLeon, and Zach Hicks all scored in the double digits in their Big Ten opener. The red-hot Nittany Lions are looking to continue their 8-1 start when they head on the road for their first Big Ten away game next Tuesday. Mike Rhodes and co. head to Piscataway, New Jersey to take on the projected NBA lottery picks Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey in the high-flying Rutgers squad at 7 p.m. The Lady Lions just tipped off their Big Ten action earlier today, as a matter of fact, against the Indiana Hoosiers. Carolyn Keeger's squad went into the BJC game 8-1 on the season, the same as Mike Rhodes' crew. Their next matchup is on the road in Rhode Island against Providence on Wednesday. The NCAA tournament has arrived for Katie Schumacher-Cawley's women's volleyball team. Penn State took on Delaware State last night in Rec Hall in the first round of the tournament, with the winner facing either UNC or Yale today at 6:30 p.m. Katie Schumacher-Cawley and co. took home some major Big Ten hardware this week, with coach earning the Big Ten Coach of the Year nod, and setter Izzy Stark grabbing the Freshman of the Year award alongside her coach. Stark, Jess Mruzik, Cameron Hanna, and Taylor Trammell earned all Big Ten first-team slots. Jillian Grimes found a place in the second team, while freshman Stark and Carolina Juravicius, a name you recognize, earned all freshman team honors. That was This Week in Penn State Sports. Back to the Tailgate Show in a moment.
The most important thing is you.
So everything never matched up, if that makes sense, with because you can't talk about Malik without talking about Matt Zollers. I just don't think you can separate them that much. So let's talk about Malik. Malik got an offer as a sophomore at camp, and remember, T-Frank, we were there. We're like, wow, look at this kid. I mean, athletically, really impressive. Okay, has a good sophomore year. Obviously, long way to go. We got to see how that plays out. We get to junior season. Malik has already visited Penn State 6 times, I believe it was, going into junior season. And then we see the rise of Matt Zollers. And he had a great junior year, don't get me wrong. And from the feedback I've gotten, and I did go watch Malik his junior year too, he did not take that next step his junior year for Malik. So there, I understood, absolutely understood, and I really kind of stressed this hard last year around this, or last fall. Well, I understood why Penn State pivoted to Matt Zollers at the time. Again, Malik had a lot of the traits that you love. It was Malik always made the hard things look easy, but the easy things look hard at times. And I don't want to say always, but there was a little bit of that. Yeah. And that I think threw Penn State off a bit. So what do? Obviously they push hard for Zollers, and it made complete sense at the time. And even when he committed to Missouri, they stayed on him in the summer. And I think like that was the point where, because Malik's junior season, at least from the feedback I've gotten from sources, like they were unsure about, they stayed on Zollers, and it didn't work out. Well, of course, what happens? Zollers ends up breaking his ankle, didn't really have much of a senior year. That kind of all fizzled out. Yes, he visited for Ohio State, but nothing was coming there. And then Malik goes on and has an awesome season. And now he's a consensus top 100 prospect in the industry ranking. So that's what I'm kind of saying, like the ups and downs of Zollers and the ups and downs of Malik never really matched up. And then at the very end, in the summer where it becomes clear, or I guess really not even the summer, in this past season, really in the last couple of months, when it becomes clear of like, okay, we kind of want to try and get another quarterback here for sure. Malik was like, well, guys, I visited you 6 times. And,
too late.
And Yeah, it was too late. And I understand it. I respect
I
that.
completely
And I
understand his
think-
perspective on it. Yeah.
Right. I mean, they had him, and they would have easily got Malik if Matt Zollers never emerges. So it is what it is. I know Malik's going to Maryland, so I don't think Penn State fans want him to do well. But I will say I really like that kid, and I hope that he goes on and becomes a good player. And I get it. Penn State fans don't want to hear that, but he's a great kid. Like, everything about Malik Washington was one of my favorite players in this class to get to know, just as a person and what he represents. And it's a shame because he would have been great. I think he would have really fit in well at Penn State. Well, let's start with this. I mean, on his call today with the staff, and I'm reading maybe too much into this, and maybe I'm over speaking, but I'll go with it anyway. Who was on the call with him today? It was his grandmother and his aunt. So, I mean, what's that tell you maybe about, I don't know enough about his parents. I don't know anything about his parents, but that grabbed my attention. This is a guy who clearly has not had stability in a long, maybe ever. And Penn State's coaches, recruiting staff talked about this.
Let's see what's happening around the Big Ten. Brought to you by Valley View Retirement Community. Enrich your life on Valley View Retirement Community's 50-plus acre campus in Big Valley, PA. Award-winning residential, personal care, skilled nursing, rehab, and memory care for older adults.
Welcome back to the Penn State Football Tailgate Show. We're the only show in town, so there is no other around the Big Ten. Everyone is off. There are only 2 teams are playing. So let's take a look at around the college football playoff schedule. Boise State, 21-7 over UNLV on Friday night. That's a relevant conversation. Texas, Georgia going on right now. Also, earlier today, Arizona State drubbing Iowa State 45-19. Likely, everything I've seen, Arizona State is the most probable matchup for Penn State if they were to lose the Big Ten championship. Of course, if they win, then they're in the Rose Bowl and they get a bye, and we'll find out later. But the 5-6 conversation is absolutely going to be determined by the success of these 4 teams that are playing now and then at 8 o'clock tonight. So what do we got going on in the Texas-Georgia game?
Yeah, nothing good, T. Frank, for the viewers. I mean, you'd much rather be watching the tailgate show with me and T. Frank than
I think
watching
you've seen as much action.
Yeah, we have more action here, T. If I punched you in the arm, there would be more action here than in that game at the moment.
I gave a fist pump a couple times.
We'll go the drives for back and forth, Texas and Georgia. Interception, punt, field goal, miss field goal, punt,
I already fell asleep. What?
Fumble. It has been a snoozer. 3-6. Texas leads at the half. The good news is, if Texas barely beats, let's say it's 9-3 win for Texas, and we beat Oregon by say 3 points, there better not be anybody saying that Texas should be won over us.
Right.
I would really hope not.
And also the fact that Penn State played the number 3 team and lost by 7 points. 7 at this point. It all runs together. Yeah, by 7 points. And then you beat the number 1 team in the country. So yeah, you went 1-1 against top 5 teams, but you won the most important one. And you also have been in every single game this year. Again, you've been in every single game this year, but you've been in every single game this year. It is a possible outcome.
Yeah, and we were talking about earlier. I always like giving the player perspective on this. We were talking about meaning something in this year. You have the opportunity to tonight basically secure a Big Ten championship and being the number 1 team in the nation.
Yeah.
And then you can set your sights on the Natty.
Yeah.
And if you do that, you go down as the greatest Penn State team ever, maybe. I don't know. People would have arguments, I'm sure, about 86 or whatever. But if you're the number 1 team and you do that, you'd be a Rose Bowl champion as well, all within that year.
And you've played more games than any other team ever in Penn State history, and maybe even in college football history, because of the number of games you have to play now. So it's kind of the same thing of the undefeated Dolphins versus an undefeated team that happens now because they play 17 games. Yes, all of these things that are historical and they're important, and we don't want to diminish the past and the accomplishments, but there's been new evidence has come to light, man. And so, yeah, this would be a pretty historic win for Penn State football.
Yeah. Let's play though.
We got to get to the game. I don't want to run out of things to say with 15 minutes left in the show, but it's go time. It is go time for football. Here's the other thing you get if you win this game. You get an extra bye week. And for a team that has been banged up down the stretch and that needs that rest and recovery, and some of the rest and recovery will not help because those players aren't coming back. Anthony Donko is not coming back. KJ Winston is not coming back. So you have to, but the players that are playing, They need to be healthy. And so that's the biggest problem. Talking about around the Big Ten, around the college football playoff conversation, is that it's a penalty to play in this game. Yes, you get a home game as the consolation prize, but you just played the number one team in the country. And now you got to go next week and play maybe Arizona State, which, watching that game, how does the Big 12 get any part of this conversation? I understand contractually why, but man, that was rough to watch. I watched it on fast forward, and I was like, that was too much football for me.
I think obviously Boise is probably going to be 4, but we need to get rid of all automatic bids. I think that needs to go away. The top 4 teams and the 12th seed getting any types of bids. I just don't think there's any reason for it. It really just muddies the water for kind of how it all shapes out, and it makes a lot of people confused. I would say the majority of the college football audience.
The ACC is going to have a team ranked ahead of Penn State in the college football playoff that gets a bye because we said so. Because we said so. Like, that's why. Because a lawyer signed a contract, and suddenly we have these rules that don't make any sense. Instead of this, all has to eventually lead to total realignment, and it's going to eventually. And these
AFC,
are the moments.
NFC.
Yes, and these are the things that are going to lead to that, Landon. Like, these are the complications where the Big Ten or the SEC are going to feel slighted somehow. The only unfortunate thing is that it isn't Ohio State in that situation, because then there would be a much larger conversation as opposed to the one we will have if something bad happens to the Nittany Lions. Okay, so just a couple minutes here. Did you watch any of the other games, like the potential path for Penn State through the playoff? Did you see any of the matchups? Did you check any of that stuff out to like just have an eye towards what might be?
As far as Arizona State?
Yeah.
They have a he's going viral right now, but they're running back.
Yes.
Yeah, he's turning heads. He was kind of all over.
Scattaboo?
Yeah, Scattaboo. Yeah,
he's Scattaboo.
Hold on. Yeah, Scattaboo right here. He had 16 carries, 172 touchdowns. And was doing the Heisman pose, saying and then he said after the game, I'm getting too much disrespect. Pretty much, I deserve to be in the conversation for the Heisman.
He's awesome. He's so fun. Watching him pinball off of Iowa State tacklers was great. He has unique contact balance, and he runs a 4.7. Just looking at him, like watching him run, I'm like, the best this is a 4.65.
Well, you know.
I just, it is what it is. Like, I don't know what to say. I'm like, that's super fun. That's super cool. Does that play anywhere else other than the Big 12, where they just opt out of defense for half of the conference?
Hey, 2012 Browns. What was it, 2011? Peyton Hillis.
You know, I didn't want to go typecast. But that's immediately what I thought about.
Everybody in the world thought Peyton Hillis when they watched Scatterbo today. That is, you can't, if you watch Scatterbo and you did not, and someone in your vicinity didn't say Peyton Hillis, I don't believe you. So I'm just, listen, we keep it real here.
The comp isn't Christian McCaffrey, guys.
No, it's not. No, it is not.
Oh my gosh. So actually, we're gonna pop out here again. This is just a quick segment because we want to talk about the larger picture. But the plan is to lock the F in and talk about the Big Ten championship game coming up tonight at 8 p.m. So we're going to come back with our predictions. We've talked about all of the challenges. We've talked about the ways that Penn State can win. I'm going to go crazy harebrained plan schemes in the next segment about whether they build a game plan that can help Penn State win. We'll see how all of those things work together. Landon will actually say meaningful things, and then we'll get out of here and get into the official pregame show for Penn State football. If you're listening on 99.5 The Bus and Bigfoot Country Legends, if you're listening on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, we'll be back with the post-game show after that. I'll get you all the details in just a minute, but we'll be back with all that on the Tailgate show.
Where do we see this one going? And I'll start the bidding with Greg Fischel. I want so badly to get the monkey off the back for James Franklin. Is this the time that Penn State breaks through and beats a top 5 team? Fitz, what do you think?
I think you were throwing it to Nate.
Yeah, I should. Nate,
I've got.
What do you think?
No, we'll go with mine. We'll play like I said, the runway up to Nate as always. But I've got. I don't have it happening. I think Penn State's injuries up front, specifically at tackle on both sides of the ball, are something that's tough to go up against. Oregon's a fantastic football team. 31-24 is what I've got. They're a little bit fresher. They're a little bit healthier. And yeah, I think this can be a real dogfight. And I think both teams will try to run. I'm curious to see what success either team has running the football. But, I can see it being a touchdown game. I think I thought Vegas was a little bit closer than I thought it would be. I thought it would be 5.5, 6.5, or maybe 6, something like that. But hey, Penn State's a good football team. Oregon's a really, really good football team. It's going to be fun, I think. And I don't see too many instances where Penn State gets reeling and has to do that. But yeah, you got to avoid the slow start. Got to avoid Oregon from jumping on that. And you got to finish your drives.
Nate, I'm a person who eats my vegetables first, and I like to save my favorite thing on the plate for last. So, do you have good news for Greg? Do you think Penn State can get it done and get the monkey off James Franklin's back?
What about you? You have to go first.
Well, so there's some technicalities here. I want you to go
all right,
first.
fine. I'll
yeah.
go. All right.
I use this video later in the week, and I need you guys to do it so that I can do it later.
All right. So here's the deal. Why not? Why not? Yeah, Penn State by a point. I think that, and you're going to crush me. This game's going to be weird. There's not going to be anybody there. Nobody from Oregon is coming to this game, and Penn State fans might drive, but flights are stupid expensive. The get-in price yesterday was $12 to go to this game. It's just going to be a weird environment for a college football game. I think that Penn State defensively has the ability to slow them down, right, to the point where it's enough to drag Penn State's offense kicking and screaming along the way, right? And the experiences, I wrote about this, the experiences that Penn State has had this season, I think are indicative of a team that has learned how to win as a team. I'm not sure that Oregon has faced, again, I don't cover Oregon, so I'm not, obviously they pulled out the Wisconsin game. They pulled out a Boise State game early in the season where they were under some duress. But I just think the amount of things that Penn State has had to hurdle sets it up well if they can get it to the fourth quarter where they will have a shot, right? But
Welcome back to the Penn State Football Tailgate Show. Please forgive me for being on my phone. I'm not being disrespectful. I'm trying to get you some information for the availability report. Breaking news, KJ Winston is out of this game. Sorry, it's just the first name that I read. Caden Saunders is out. I'm trying to scan this quickly. Keon Wiley, Cam Wallace, all these names that we know. Both Trey Wallace and Elliot Washington, who were at practice, those players are both available. I don't believe they're even on the availability report from what I'm reading here. Guard Marcus Harper is not listed in the availability report for Oregon, so they will be at full strength on the offensive line. Does that change your opinion? Because I know you liked Harper when you were watching him.
Yeah, maybe a little bit.
Yeah,
maybe a little bit. But I think nonetheless, it's still going to be on these guys up front. Zane, Kozaya, the guys, can they establish themselves in that run game and not allow Jordan to really get going? And that's going to be the biggest thing, because I think they're going to try to lean on their run game to start. That's my prediction. I think this is an offense, like I said, everybody hears about the explosiveness at wide receiver and Tez Johnson's back.
I don't love this offense from a scheme perspective. I understand it. Let me be clear. I'm not saying that it's bad or that I know better than the offensive coordinator. I'm not a huge fan of wide receiver screens. I find them to be first, aesthetically displeasing. I don't enjoy watching the just throw a ball 5 yards out and then watching them make somebody miss and then you get 4 yards and it's like, well, we could have done that more efficiently. It's called a run play. But just generally, the offense is not. It's more conservative than you would think. When they have to get to those big plays, they go for it. But it's a lot of short plays. They spam screens and then they like to run the ball, as you were saying.
Yeah, they'll they'll rely on the run game. And so what's interesting here is for the first 7 games, Dillon Gabriel did not throw for under 240 yards. Every single game over 240. Now, the past 3 games hasn't even reached the 220 mark in the past 3 games. So they not only some of that is Tez Johnson being out, their pass game hasn't been as explosive, but also a piece of that is it seems that they're okay living in a world where they actually kind of win through their run game, or at least rely to kind of grind out a game on their run game. So that has been proven to me that they're okay with that. It's not some identity crisis where it's like basically Ohio State of like, we're going to run the ball against Michigan and we're going to be the stronger, more physical guys. And it's like, you have Jeremiah Smith, you have Emeka Ibuka versus Michigan. Will Johnson's not even playing, but you want to run the ball in between the tackles against Mason Graham, the best defensive tackle.
Without your starting tackle or your starting center.
You
know what? I lost my right hand, and I'm going to fight you with my left hand behind my back.
Exactly.
That's what we're going to do.
Saying all that to say, I don't think Oregon is going to do that and force themselves into a little bit of a box.
Right.
They will go with the run game if they say, hey, it's not working. They're starting to do well up front. They will turn and they will be able to sling the ball. So they are really solid on both sides.
They're at full strength on offense. And the thing that I find, I mentioned this earlier, and I just want to kind of like put a bow on the way I've been thinking about this offense and the way I've been thinking about the way that they built this team. It's almost like light and darkness. So like the best place to hide when you're playing hide and seek is behind a light, because you can't see through the bright light and you're hiding in like the really dark corner of the room. And that's what they do with size and speed. So you attack the middle of the field with that run game, with a big physical offensive line, a big tight end. Even if they spread you out, they can run the ball. Condense, they can run the ball. And then they use that speed because you have to focus on what's in the box. Now there's more room for the guys out wide. Against Michigan, Michigan played 2 high safeties. What they do, they spam those screens until they brought a safety down, and suddenly now you're playing cover 3. You got touchdowns galore. They can create space wherever they want it because they have that size and that speed orbiting around it. Same thing on defense. They force you to bring players into the box, and suddenly now you don't have as many athletes out wide where, oh, by the way, they have all those transfer corners and DBs that are fast. So they have created kind of a monster here from this particular lineup.
Yeah, they have. They have brought some real ballers in, and I think it's time to get to our score predictions, T. Frank, and I will start us off here. Penn State's defense is going to have to play, but this Oregon offense is good enough to the point where we are going to still have to put up some points, no matter how well our defense really does play.
Yeah.
Give me Penn State 34, Oregon 31.
Oh!
Yep. I got us bringing home the Big Ten championship, being #1 team in the nation. It's going to get wild downtown State College. T. Frank, call the babysitter. We're going to bring you out, have you at Champs doing a keg stand or something. I don't know. That's the dreams for tonight, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm more of a shots guy.
Okay, there we go. That'll work.
So I'm going to go a little bit lower scoring because I think that Penn State's defense can fight. I think that Penn State's offense can do some things, and I think that they are going to come out and be aggressive. If I were Andy Kolnicki, the thing I would want to do here is that tempo into shot plays, because Oregon likes to run quarters and cover 3, which are 2 things that Andy Kolnicki has done a really good job of dialing up shot plays. To get a predictable call, you get a 5-yard chunk, you get a 10-yard chunk, tempo, tempo, tempo. Suddenly, Amari Evans, big post, everyone's drinking. That's how Penn State, that's what I see in terms of how they could make that happen. Obviously, with a lot of Tyler Warren in the middle. So I'm going to go Penn State 24, Oregon 27. That's what I...
It's all right, T. Frank.
I feel bad. I feel bad to end that way, but we got to end the show now. So
real quick, I will say I'm wearing my Rose Bowl T-shirt for a reason. Victory smells like roses. If Penn State wins this game, we are also headed to the Rose Bowl.
All right, and we'll see all of you after the game here with the Penn State Tailgate Show. Thank you for being here. This is not the last time. We'll talk to you in the future.